Hello, magical people. My name is Luminix, and I would like to welcome you back to my channel. Happy belated solstice, happy holidays, and happy new year. I hope you have been enjoying it and getting to spend time with things that make your heart feel full and satisfied. In this video, I am going to talk about a reading I gave myself actually a few weeks ago. And when I gave myself this reading, I asked a simple question. And that simple question was based around the context that my plan was to make a video that night. But then I pulled these three cards and decided that this was something I felt like I needed to sit with a little bit more for a variety of reasons. And then, life got busy and I definitely have some avoidance showing up in there. So, making videos is hard, and as I have mentioned before, I find it especially challenging in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I decided to take some extra time with this, and then I got a little avoidant, and here we finally are. And today is actually New Year's, so I felt like it was time to just finally take action and do the thing that in the long run will take less time, by far, than the amount of time I spent thinking about it. So, typical. Anyhow, so this reading. Like I said, I planned on making a video that night, and I sat down and meditated for a little bit, sort of cleared my mind, and asked some questions along the lines of, what are the themes that I should be thinking about here, and what are things that I could be putting out into the world and talking about in terms of community and how I could best be of service and how a video that I make could best be of service. And the three cards that came out were Wrath, Sacred Space, and Survival. And this lined up with so many things that I'd already been thinking about that I felt like these cards were really encouraging me to dig in a little bit. And so I did that. And now I'm here. And I think I'm ready to talk about this reading a little bit, and I hope that there are things of value that you are able to take from this video. So, I feel like largely what this reading is pointing at is it would basically be helpful at this time for me to talk a little bit about the sort of political environment that myself and other members of my community, which is the LGBTQIA2S plus community, the alphabet mafia, as they sometimes call us. And, I feel like that first card, Wrath, really does sort of point to a lot of things that we have seen building for quite some time. And those things that we have seen building for quite some time are causing some real alarm and concern and anxiety with what is coming our way. And I guess by that, there's a million things that I mean, but I guess like one specific thing that I could point at is that just in general, if you look at the United States and the number of bills that have been introduced on a state level over the last several years that are meant to strike directly at the LGBTQIA2S plus community, then you can see that there has been just an really alarming increase, and that it is very much an arc where things have been accelerating in an alarming fashion. And I think some of the rhetoric that has come out of the incoming administration has not done anything to allay that anxiety. And so that is just the reality that we live in. And so I feel like the second card here, the Sacred Space card, which is really just beautiful, beautiful card. I think this is an ask to not only acknowledge but also to create as a sort of response to that wrathful energy that we feel out there. And as with all of my readings, you're welcome to apply this in whatever way feels most fitting for you. Maybe you aren't a member of a community that is feeling like there is specific targeting that is about to happen. And if that's not the case for you, then, well, huzzah, that's great. I'm glad for you. But perhaps there is a personal situation that you have where you feel like there is the energy of wrath or anger. I feel like this reading still applies. And so again, going back to the second card of creating sacred space. Like, there is nothing that I personally can do to change this wrathful energy and to create a situation where it just doesn't exist. But what I can do is create, in response to that, places that are sacred and spaces that are sacred. And what do we mean when we talk about sacred space? And again, I'm no expert on anything, let alone everything, but for me, sacred space does have a multitude of meanings, and I want to unpack that for just a moment. So there is, in my spiritual practices, there are times where I create sacred space with intention for the purpose of sort of setting the table for the ritual and creating not only a blank canvas, but a blank canvas that is imbued with the energy of love and compassion and understanding and safety. And of course, I always encourage people to engage in, whatever rituals they feel work for them. But I think that sacred space can also be looked at through the lens of more day-to-day experiences. And I think that another way of describing sacred space would be to call it safe spaces and safe people and safe relationships. And so I feel like in 2025 for myself, and I strongly encourage everybody to do this all of the time because this is universally like good stuff to do, but I think particularly in the larger situations where there is a feeling of wrath, then the importance of doing this becomes even more dire. And so, like, as we recollect on the past year, really asking ourselves the question of how do we feel about our community? And again, another word that's going to mean something different for each of us. But looking at the relationships within our community and what feels safe to us, and like, okay, let's unpack safe for just a moment. And when I use that word with regards to relationships, community, and situations, I think what I'm really trying to communicate is that those scenarios that allow you to be your authentic self in a way that isn't overly judging or affirming, and that also isn't in a way that doesn't have a level of accountability to it. So this isn't just like this obviously wouldn't be a situation where you can just do and say whatever you want and there are no consequences. Like that, while that may feel like a safe place for you, that is creating an unsafe place for others. So it can't really be a safe space in its entirety. So I believe that accountability within safe spaces is also really important. So when as we're looking back, I think again that this is a good opportunity for us to look at our specific situations and look at the relationships that we have and ask them, whether they're relationships with individual people or relationships within organizations or within our family of origin or our chosen family or our work scenario, whatever the case may be. Just it's an opportunity to look at our life and ask ourselves, are these places that feel good to me? And are these places that are allowing me to cultivate joy, which I think is going to be deeply, deeply important in the coming time. Like, I think there are some people who maybe think that I'm overreacting or being hyperbolic, but I think they're wrong. And I think the proof will be in the tasting of the pudding. And I believe that the next period of time will be a time of a lot of chaotics. Chaotics? There will be a lot of chaotic energy, and I think it will be a pretty dark time in a lot of ways. But that is what makes it even more important for us to cultivate the joy within ourselves, because that is when we come into the third part here, which is survival. But one thing that I want to point out about this card is that within this survival card, there are also these beautiful blossoms, right? And I kind of imagine this card sort of extending and this tunnel that this crow is hiding in at the moment not only has beauty within it, but that like just beyond our vision there is the safe opening for that crow to launch to full safety and allow itself to literally fly and for us to metaphorically thrive. And so I think that as we are looking at the spaces that we have without looking at the spaces that we have around us that we already exist in and how we want to shape those going forward, I think that we do want to keep our eye most paramount on making sure that we survive, but that surviving isn't the end goal, and that the end goal is to do what we can, even in the smallest ways possible, that allow us to enjoy our survival as we move towards our own personal and, God is willing, collective ability to thrive on the whole. So, I think where I want to go next with this is taking a sip of water. So some more thoughts on joy. Um, I think joy also is a real... I think each person living within their personal joy is also an opposition tactic and a very subtle fuck you to the haters. And I love that. And that, again, is an energy that I want to promote in creating my safe space and expanding my sacred space. And I think that that ties into another thing that I've been thinking about quite a lot, which is about not obeying in advance. And I guess, here I speak specifically to my queers, because those are the folks that I feel like I can, with the most authority, speak to. Because, of course, no community is a monolith, and I speak for no one except for myself, but I know that within queer community, all of the people that I've talked to of late, and everything that I'm sort of seeing out there in the world right now is, again, pointing to that fear and, that fear often sometimes makes us want to be smaller. And, I've even heard some people talking about going back in the closet. And if that's what you need to do for your survival, my friend, then do what you've got to do. Because again, survival is along the path of the goal. And if we can't do this, then we can't get to that true goal of fully thriving. But for those of us, myself included, who have the privilege of not having to do that, I believe that not obeying in advance for me personally means continuing to maybe, try and make myself visible. Even though, obviously, if you've seen any videos of mine, you know that, like, I find this shit scary as shit, and yet I still feel compelled to do it. And, yeah. Yeah, I can't remember exactly where I was going with that thought because I looked at my bullet list and then realized how long I'd been rambling and had this big moment of feeling very self-conscious of how long it's taking me to say what I'm not sure I really want to say, or not exactly sure how to say it. So I really hope that some of you are getting value out of anything that I'm saying. Anyhow, I guess I will continue. Another thing that I had wanted to talk to you about, just in terms of creating sacred space and that idea of survival, is that, within the sacred space, that allows us to do something that, is kind of hard. And it's that sort of push-pull of challenging yourself, but not being too mean to yourself. Because I know for me, sometimes doing new things is hard, and putting yourself out there is hard and scary, and takes up a lot of energy. And there can be, for me, I guess there's a lot of internal negative self-talk, just, a lot in general. And so one of the things that I am trying to do is lowering the barrier of getting myself able to do a thing. That was super poorly said, but lowering the barrier of entry for myself, I guess. And so, like, what that could mean is, the ways in which we build community and the ways in which we tie ourselves to the things and the people that we love doesn't have to look conventional. It doesn't have to look the same for everybody. It doesn't have to be on everybody's timeline. And sometimes it's not even about other people at all, because frankly, for myself, a lot of the things that allow me to cultivate joy within my own life are very much solo experiences. And so creating sacred space, while it is very much a part about community, it is also about the community of yourself and the various motivations that exist within you. And so, since the election, especially right after the election, things felt kind of dim in my mind. And it was, a very not good feeling. Let's just call it that. It was just a very not good feeling. And so one of the things that I did in response to that is I just started basically doing some art therapy with myself, which I always find fun. And then at somewhere along the way, I had a realization that I could do something with that art therapy so that it serves more than one purpose. And as I've mentioned before, I'm on the journey of becoming a sister of perpetual indulgence, and one of the parts of that journey is coming up with a personal blessing to give. And some people, as part of their personal blessing, will have a takeaway, an actual physical item that the blessee gets to walk away with at the end of my experience. And so I basically had made a few like larger art pieces of just a bunch of different oil paints or oil sticks rather that, I pretty much just like to play with the pretty colors, and then I do some sort of like finger painting at the end, and then I like to make fun little like dot, I guess dot point dot. I don't even know what to call those. I guess shapes and such. Anyways, so I made a bunch of these as my little blessing cards as takeaways for people, and they say "You are magic" on them. They are all. No, this one goes. Wait, what? Yes, this way. This one goes like that. And as you can see, they are all completely different, but they all have the same message, which is that you are magic. And then I just assigned them at the end, at the time, as postulant Raven Delighted to Moon. That is my sister name. And it felt really good to make those, and so I made some bigger ones. And these are more along the lines of like affirmation cards or maybe an altar card. And so, I made myself, this one might be a little hard to read it, but it says, "I allow myself to thrive." I made some really fun gay ones. Oh, this is just this is an "I am magic." So rather than leaving somebody with the parting message, "You are magic," I changed the language on that to "I am magic" on the affirmation cards. And then for funsies, I also made some "I embody gay joy," "I embody trans joy," and magical faggotry cards. I've given some of these away to some people, and I'm not sure what, I'm just going to keep making them because they are fun to make and they make me feel good. And I'm just going to trust they are small and they don't take up much space. I also painted the back of each one because it's just on cardstock. So as with many things that I make, there are many, many steps involved. Surely far more than are strictly necessary to get a thing done, but that's fine. So yeah, I'm just going to keep making them because this is something else that I like to do that makes me feel joyful. And also some things I had the most awesome thing happen yesterday. I think it was yesterday, and it was also so commonplace for me, which makes it even more special rather than it being less special. But before I tell you what that is, I'm going to take another sip of water. Thank you for your patience while I tend to that. I have been talking for a long time. So, anyhow, yesterday I was out in the garden because I have been on vacation for like 9 or 10 days, which is fucking amazing. It's just, oh my god, it's just amazing, which is another way that you can cultivate joy, and which, this is just as a quick aside, the ways in which I cultivate joy for myself is one of the most valuable gifts that I've ever learned to give myself is the gift of time and the gift of space and the gift of just being able to tinker around with what's making me feel good in the moment. And for me, that's usually making stuff and being out in the garden, which brings me back to my amazing commonplace moment yesterday. It truly was a backyard magic moment. Um, so I was out in the yard and I have a ton of strawberries that grow back there, and most of them have just kind of propagated on their own. I have moved a few around in the past few months, and so now I'm just I got a huge pile of compost delivered a couple months back, and so I've been slowly eating through that giant pile by spreading it out. But before I'm spreading it out, I'm also, pulling off the old growth and getting rid of what no longer serves in the physical world, and maybe a little bit in the mental world as well. And so I was spending some time outside in the garden yesterday doing that. And there were, as is typical, there were a couple of squirrels kicking around. I think it was probably Irene and Gigi and Paisley. Those are the three I seem to see the most these days. And there were a couple of crows. And of late, I made this crow perch in the backyard, which any of you who've seen previous videos have probably seen before. I don't know if anybody will get 25 minutes into a video, so I might just be talking to myself, so I'm going to just really enjoy it here. But I made that crow perch, and some of the crows like to use it, but I've noted that some of the crows, or maybe it's the same crows on different days, don't like to use it. And so I also have this little shed in the backyard that has some moss on the roof, which allows there to be some texture up there, which means I can throw some peanuts on top of the roof, which is also a safe place in my yard for a crow to land, and they can retrieve their treats there. So I've been doing that as my peanut pocket is usually full as I'm tinkering about in the yard. And so there were a couple of crows kicking around, and I also have a couple of hummingbird feeders out there. And because it is very late December in the Pacific Northwest, there's not a whole lot blooming right now. And so those hummingbird feeders become very important to my local little guys. And I had this moment where I looked up and there was a little bit of a sun break going on, so there was some sun shining, and there were these couple of crows kicking around eating their peanuts, and there were a couple of squirrels kicking around, looking for peanuts or digging peanuts or eating peanuts. And then there were these three hummingbirds. And, I have more than one feeder, so while there may have been some territorial back and forth happening there, it was spectacular to watch. I got to hear a noise that I'm not sure I've ever heard a hummingbird make. It went up very, very high, very fast, and when it was up high, it made this one particular noise and then swooped down really fast, and it was just really incredible to behold. And so having all of that beauty happen in one of my favorite places in the world just made my heart feel really full and made me feel very grateful for the life that I get to have, and made me feel very joyful in that moment that was something that I get to have the witnessing of that moment. And so, cultivating joy is going to look different for everybody, but it's very important to not only our survival, but to allowing that survival to be one of growth as well, and one where there is some beauty happening. So, yeah. Another thing that I would maybe recommend, or maybe recommend isn't, well, you know what, I'm going to reframe that. It is definitely something that I recommend, and I'm recommending it to myself. If any of you also decide to hear it, then that is fabulous. But I think that, one of the other things that I'll be doing is, I often have this push-pull where I enjoy growing. I enjoy the idea of growing and see the necessity of growth in a way, and for myself. And yet also I find it scary. I also have an unhelpful, very judgy, um, self-negating, very perfectionist part that shows up sometimes, especially when trying to do something new and scary, or as with making videos, maybe not so new, but still scary. And, sometimes I've found that helping to navigate that push-pull by allowing myself to lower the barrier of self-entry can be really helpful. So, again, this is one of those things that can show up very differently for people. But like for myself, some of the ways that that has showed up, as in like making this video. One of the barriers of entry is that my heat is really loud, and there's a lot of background noise. This is certainly, this is just where I live, so it's not like a studio or anything. And because I sometimes have a hyper awareness of the way things are perceived, I worry about that. And so that allows me to just not make videos at all, because I don't know how to really fix any of that stuff. But I'm hoping that having the microphone will help fix it, because, the heat is going right now. I'm not freezing my ass off, which is lovely, because that makes my body hurt. And yeah, so that's one way in which I lowered the barrier to entry there. With my journey of becoming a sister of perpetual indulgence, I had never done any kind of drag before that. I've never really had a particular interest in makeup before, and now I find I own more makeup than I've ever owned in my entire life put together, and I'm kind of loving it. And, aside of, sparkles, which, I am modeling for you here, I don't know how much of a desire I have to bring makeup into my daily secular life. I don't think that's going to, whatever, if it happens, it happens, but that hasn't been an inkling that I've observed at all. But I have really been enjoying it within the bounds of, my sistering existence. But there's a lot of skill sets there that I just really don't have. And so in lowering the barrier to entry there, I have decided, for at least the time being, fuck false eyelashes. Like, I just can't. I'm not going to do that. But there's no reason to not do a bunch of other things that are, also perhaps maybe weren't within my skill set, but have become a little bit more within my skill set. And so I sort of lowered the barrier of entry there. And there's millions of ways that this can show up. So kind of holding ourselves in a space where we recognize maybe something about our life or our existence or what we do isn't ideal, but also recognizing that, to truly master anything, you have to put in a lot of time, and, put mastering, kick that can down the road a few years. To do a thing even adequately typically requires a little bit of, sort of doing things that you're not familiar with, and doing new things and acquiring new tools and new skills, whether those be physical things or whether we're talking about physical skills. So another way that you could lower the barrier of entry, in which I personally have a tool that I've decided to help myself with, is that, 2024, while it did have a lot of beautiful things, and I am overall, like I said, deeply fucking grateful for my life and that I get to live it. Like, sometimes I'm honestly just astounded that I've kind of bumbled myself into an existence after many a false start, which I don't want to say false start, that's not the right word, because after many paths that I thought were leading me one place, didn't lead me to the place, or when I got to the place, I found them not to be as satisfying as I was hoping. There were many such sort of experiences in my life, and yet, despite that lack of true NI about where I was going, I have managed to really create I have managed to create for myself a quite lovely existence, for which I am deeply, deeply grateful. But what was I going to say? Gosh dang it. I got so on the gratitude kick that I forgot where I was going. Um, oh, yes, another tool that I have offered myself. So while there is all of that gratitude about my life and being deeply grateful for it, that certainly by no way implies that it's perfect or that 2024 hasn't caused my own, a personal backsliding in a way. And for me, that has been mostly with regards to, my mental health journey. And, if you're not a new viewer, and I mean, fuck, if you're still here at all, fucking thank you very much, very grateful. But, I've alluded in my past videos, I've talked about how the past several years, were very difficult. There was a lot of grief to work through, and that probably did at some point move a little bit into depression for sure. So there was definitely some mental health stuff there, but it was predominantly grief that just needed to be processed. It just needed to happen. And 2024 saw a definite reduction of that grief overall in my life and in my body and experience. But what it did bring was a huge comeback of anxiety. And anxiety is one of my older sort of mental health struggles. And so when I did have that backsliding happen, there was some mental anguish about it as well. And it felt like I was butthurt about it. I really was. But then I moved through that and decided that, well, I have many tools in my personal arsenal for how to manage anxiety. Sometimes, medication can also be a tool. And so I did give myself the gift of a psychiatrist, or a few appointments with a psychiatrist anyways. And that has been wonderful. And, so I have given myself another tool that I hope to not need in the long run, but do need right now. And that tool has been instrumental in me being able to better get in touch with the things that bring me joy rather than fixating on the things that are bringing the anxiety. And yet at the same time, they're not doing anything to cloud or erase or allow me to pretend that anxiety doesn't exist. So I feel like for myself, I found a helpful balance there. So again, oh, hi, Squeaky. Hi, Squeaky. I'll see you in a second, buddy. Well, as you can maybe hear or maybe not hear, the stray that sometimes shows up demanding to be fed has in fact shown up and is perhaps even about to make a camera appearance. I'm not sure, but he is on the table now. And I have been yammering for a very, very long time, but I think, outside of this one last bit, the one thing I didn't share about was the ways in which 2024 is ending on such a high note for me. And I did have that commonplace magical moment just yesterday, but oh my gosh, I had a big, totally not commonplace magical moment just mere days ago. And I just want to tell you about it real quick before I feed Squeaky here. So, as I've mentioned, I am on the journey to becoming a Sister of Perpetual Indulgence. I have moved through the aspirancy stage, and after aspirancy, there's a postulant stage, and then there is a novice sister stage, and then after that is when you become a fully professed sister. And so, I recently elevated to novice sister, and just the way it worked out was, on the one hand, so atypical, and yet I think, as in the way things sometimes often happen to me, there was an atypical typicalness to it that I just find utterly perfect. So the way things typically happen is that there's an interview process and then there is a vote. And if you pass the minimum requirement for the vote, then you take your vows there, and this is all done in a general meeting setting, and then you are a novice sister, and that begins that part of the path for you. And I did the interview part, but at the meeting there wasn't quorum. So they couldn't actually vote on the spot. So I had about 6 days of kind of limbo. And then a bunch of the votes came in, and mathematically, it was apparently I passed the bar. I don't know how many votes came in or what the final count was. I don't think they share that information with junior members, and that's fine. I don't care. Whatever. I passed the minimum. That's all I really need to know. And so, yeah, so I was actually able to take vows in a complete surprise move. My mother and the mistress of novice and several of the sisters, I was not in face. I was just as Lou at my favorite dance party that I'm at every month, which is a big gay dance party, and it is kind of like church for me. And so I was there, and during one of the they have performances. It's like a dance party, but then there are also a bunch of drag performances a couple of times through the night. And during one of the breaks for performances, I was actually brought on stage by the sisters at this place that I value so much and that I've been to just so many times over so long. Like, I've gotten to know people simply by the fact that I just show up at the same place over and over every month, and have, over that course of time, made so many friends and met so many amazing and wonderful people. And so I got to take vows on stage there to become a novice sister. So that was just such an unexpected and really deeply magical, wild moment. And yeah, it really just kind of blew my mind. I know that it was recorded, and I'm looking forward to seeing the recording, because while it was not by any means a traumatic experience, there was definitely enough chaos happening where my ability to be fully embodied in the moment and record it did seem to be a little maybe not online, as is the case for me. Is that that's something, I guess, new that I'm learning, as I've mentioned before with videos where I've talked about, like, the hate crime, which also one reason I'm happy to say goodbye to 2024 is that, yeah, that's the year that happened. Oh, man, I am rambling your fucking ears off yet. I don't think anybody's going to watch this video, but I'm so far in, and I feel so much like I needed to say all these things, so I'm just going to wrap it up, feed Squeaky, go have a pee, and then move on with my day. But anyhow, to finish this story, what was I even saying? Oh my god, I got off course so easily. I distract myself. Yes, that's what I was saying, is that with the hate crime of 2024, I found that, that's another reason I'm saying happy to say goodbye to that year. But as I recollected during that time, my ability to create memories and be embodied in moments where bad, scary, traumatic things are happening is diminished. That's not really terribly typical, as I understand it, for people especially with traumas in their history. And but I'm also finding, or found out last weekend, that is also the case when emotions are heightened, even when it's like super, like a positive thing. It's definitely not as bad, because I definitely do remember parts of it, like with a lot more clarity than I remember, the hate crime thing being happening. But it is definitely not crystal clear. So I know that there are recordings out there. I have only seen a snippet of one. Uh-oh, my low battery remaining warning just came on. So I am getting signs from the cats, I'm getting signs from my bladder, and I am getting signs from my technology that this is really fucking time to wrap it up, Lou. Just wrap it up. So I guess that's it. I think I have said more than enough. If there is anyone, literally anyone, who watches all of this video, then wow, you are amazing, and I am deeply, deeply grateful for your existence. And having said that, above all else, don't forget to be kind and gentle with yourself. I will try and do the same for me, and I will see you soon. Ish. Lee. Probably.